Good day everyone. For today's video, I'll be summarizing the highlights of American literature. American literature. American literature is literature predominantly written or produced in English in the United States of America and its preceding colonies. Before the founding of the United States, the 13 colonies in the eastern coast of the present-day United States were heavily influenced by English literature. What is the purpose of American literature? American literature comprises all the written works produced in the United States and its preceding colonies. American literature is very important for the education of people as it reveals the culture and history of the United States. Moreover, American literature studying in other countries gives foreigners the opportunity to get to know American culture, history, and great works of the great authors better. Here are the 8 periods of American literature. The first period is called Puritanism. Puritanism is a religious reform movement in the late 16th and 17th century that sought to purify the Church of England of remnants of the Roman Catholic called Popery that the Puritans claim had been retained after the religious settlement reached early in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Puritanism may be defined primarily by the intensity of the religious experience that it fostered. Puritans believed that it was necessary to be a covenant relationship with God in order to be redeemed from one's sinful condition, that God had chosen to reveal salvation through preaching. Puritans became noted in the 17th century for a spirit of moral and religious earnestness that informed their whole way of life, and they sought through church reform to make their lifestyle the pattern for the whole nation. Their efforts to transform the nation contributed both to civil war in England and to the founding of colonies in America as working models of the Puritan way of life. The second period is the Age of Reason or Persuasion. The Age of Reason is a period during the 17th to 18th centuries when many individuals refused to acknowledge the authority of the scripture and instead of exalted their own reason to a place of extreme authority. The Age of Reason or Persuasion tend to focus on persuasive writing, intended to convince citizens their own reason to join revolutionary causes. Most of their writings was political, responses to the strained relationship with Great Britain and to break free, to form a new government. Next is Romanticism. Romanticism, attitude or intellectual orientation that characterized many works of literature, painting, music, architecture, criticism, and historiography in Western civilization over a period from the late 18th to the mid-19th century. Romanticism can be seen as a rejection of the precept of order, calm, harmony, balance, idealization, and rationality that typified classicism in general and late 18th century neoclassicism in particular. These are the 5 characteristics of Romanticism. The fourth period is a Transcendentalism, developed as the protest against the general state of spirituality and in particular state of intellectualism at Harvard University. The core beliefs are inherent goodness of people and inherent goodness of nature. This period had their own club named the Transcendental Club and published their own journal entitled The Dial. Next period is Realism and Naturalism. This period had a feeling of disillusionment. Common subjects of this period are slums of rapidly growing cities, poor factory workers, corrupt politicians, and factories replacing farmlands. And this period also sought to explain behavior psychologically and socially. The sixth period is Modernism. Modernism is a cultural movement that generally includes the progressive art and architecture, music, literature, and design which emerged in the decades before 1914. It also a movement of artists and designers who rebelled against late 19th century academic and historicist traditions and embraced the new economic, social, and political aspects of the emerging modern world. Next period is the Harlem Renaissance. Around 1920 to 1940, aka the Jazz period and the Roaring Twenties. There was a black cultural movement in Harlem, New York, and some poetry rhythms based on spiritual and jazz. Other poetry used conventional lyrics. The historical movements of importance are the New Negro movement and the Prohibition. The last is the contemporary period, around 1950 up to present, aka postmodernism, influenced by studies of media, language, and information technology. This period offers new literary forms and techniques, which includes works composed of only dialogues, combining fiction and non-fiction, and authors experimenting the physical appearance of their work. Korean War and Vietnam War were the historical events of importance in contemporary period.
Some famous authors in American literature.